hotter weather, more frequent hot weather, higher energy bills potentially, and just degraded quality of life. You know, it's harder to play outdoors, it's harder to concentrate, it's harder to sleep at night. So I just really wanted to underscore that and just also contrast it with the coast, where people generally do not have air conditioning and are generally going to be affected very differently by days above 100 degrees. Of course, our focus is on Fresno, but that's kind of a very different scenario on the coast versus inland. So the good news is that we can implement preventative strategies now to mitigate heat health impacts. And the CalTHARS project has developed a toolkit for local and state stakeholders. And in the short term, this can include increasing awareness of heat-related vulnerability and identification of areas that are vulnerable to extreme heat events. And in the nearer term to medium term, we can remedy the built environment. That is to say, we can retrofit buildings with more insulation and or more energy efficient cooling equipment, and perhaps increases to the tree canopy. We can also try to enhance community and home cooling programs. Specifically, I'm referring to community cooling centers, which are publicly available shelters, which might be a library or community center, which are open to the public and air conditioned, that people might turn to if they lack sufficient cooling in their home. So our approach is to incorporate both community inputs and science. Community engagement is an important piece of the project. I'll discuss that a little bit more. That can inform, for example, how cooling centers could be optimized or become more optimal. And we also included neighborhood scale building modeling and outdoor measure modeling, which I'll describe in a moment. But all these factors fold into our heat or feed into our heat resilience toolkit output, which includes many items, including a community cooling guide, fact sheets. I won't read all these items, but they also include policy and program recommendations. That I won't have time to get to all of these, but I just wanted to just mention that we have several items of the heat resilience toolkit. So community engagement, as I mentioned, was a very important and key part of the project to help us understand how residents cope with extreme heat, to better understand residents' needs, preferences, and barriers to propose cooling strategies, such as going to cooling centers or installing solar window films, for example, and also to inform our modeling assumptions, for example, what types of cooling equipment and how old is their air conditioner or swamp cooler. To do this, we employed 4 primary outreach methods. And this was led by Susan Mazur-Stoneman, our social scientist, and also West Fresno Family Resource Center, our community-based organization partner based in Fresno. So we had 2 community meetings, one at the beginning and one at the end of the project, 4 focus groups, 11 in-home interviews, which are very in-depth. And I should say that the focus groups and in-home interviews were just conducted just before COVID. But after that, we primarily went to remote outreach with about 90 or 88 phone interviews. So we modeled both active and passive measures, and the passive indoor cooling measures were modeled in a worst case heat wave with and without grid power available. And they included several window treatments, such as window blinds and the aforementioned solar control window films, sort of provide some tinting to your windows. And then also some cool surfaces and roof treatments, including Cool Roof, which basically provides greater reflectivity of your roof or from your wall of the sunlight. Also roof insulation and radiant barrier, and also natural ventilation, which is basically opening windows and or doors to admit cooler air primarily at night. We modeled 8 active indoor cooling measures additionally, and 2 passive outdoor cooling measures. So for the active cooling measures, they included fans and evaporative or swamp cooler, and 4 different types of air conditioners as shown. And I won't really be discussing the outdoor modeling as much today, but we modeled also cool pavements and cool walls. Their impact, for example, on outdoor near surface temperature, air temperature. For For the building modeling, we utilized a neighborhood scale building modeling tool developed at LBL called City BES. It's available at this website below. It's an open tool for neighborhood to urban scale or district scale modeling, which is to say that it has the capability to model an ensemble of buildings, like for a commercial area, all of the small office buildings, for example, or all of the taller buildings, or all of those buildings together. And so for Fresno, we have developed a residential building data set for several neighborhoods in Southwest Fresno. And so, for example, you can measure an energy efficiency measure such as insulation or more energy efficient HVAC equipment. And you can look across the set of buildings that get that upgrade to look at the energy savings and the overall energy costs. It can also look at interactions like the shading of a building that might affect the solar PV output from another building. So the overall workflow for the two scales of modeling is shown here, which is pretty detailed, and I'm primarily showing this just for reference, so I probably won't go into great detail here. But essentially, we have two scales of modeling at the prototype or individual building level, so single family, 1 level and 2 level, and multifamily 8-unit prototype buildings. And then we aggregate those to model a neighborhood. So this particular neighborhood is a residential neighborhood, underserved, disadvantaged neighborhood in Southwest Fresno. It's the King Elementary School District, and it's about 500 households. And so we first developed the prototype buildings with inputs from surveys and weather data, creating baseline models. Then we have measures like insulation or passive or active cooling measures. We run those simulations for passive measures with grid on, and then we also look at grid off. And then we calculate the outputs in the form of resilience, which are basically health or safety metrics, and then we summarize our results. And we do that at the district scale, just to say at the scale of all of the buildings in the neighborhood. So we worked in two neighborhoods in Southwest Fresno, King and Kirk. And the things to note here is that there are a lot of older buildings. So in Kirk in particular, the median age is 1940. The second thing to note is that a lot of the buildings which are in blue color are single family, and they tend to be low rise. So we don't really have high rise. It's 1 or 2 story residential buildings primarily. And this is just showing the worst case heat wave that was modeled. So it's 7 days between 108 and 111 degrees Fahrenheit, or 42 to 45 degrees Celsius, roughly. And this is just showing how the indoor temperatures, this is the outdoor temperature, the top curve. The next 4 curves are the indoor temperatures if there was no cooling, no power available. So you can see that things can reach a very dangerous temperature. And these are just different vintages of the homes. And then these are the temperature profiles with the power available. Okay, so just want to mention what the output metric was. So we used a variety of resilience metrics, again, modeled during worst case heat wave as a function of the modeled measure. And these included 4 resilience metrics, including unmet degree hour, heat index caution hours, set, and PMV. And all of these are slightly different, and they consider different metrics. So for example, unmet degree hours just considers the indoor air temperature, while heat index considers both the air temperature and the relative humidity, while the last 2 are a little bit more comprehensive and include other factors, including mean radiant temperature, airspeed, metabolism, and clothing. Each of these metrics, however, have some limitations, as you might imagine, and there are other metrics like wet globe bulb temperature is another one. And we've noted some of those limitations here, but as you include more parameters, it becomes probably a better overall indicator. And there are also thresholds that we've taken for health and safety. So for example, for heat index, you may have seen different levels of safety, so caution level, extreme caution, danger, and extreme danger, and similar types of thresholds for comfort and safety are shown for the other metrics. All right, so this is just an example of what unmet degree hour means. It's essentially just the total area under the curve for an indoor temperature, which is the blue curve, versus its threshold. So it's the integral or the area, and that is the UDH, the unmet degree hours. So you want this to be as small as possible. All right, so we found several key vulnerabilities for residents in disadvantaged communities in South Fresno. So over 70% reported feeling uncomfortably hot at home very often during the summer. And residents on the top floors and those residents in units that lack air conditioning, which are about 15% of households, are especially vulnerable. So we saw old and inefficient window air conditioners, for example, and many homes just have a swamp cooler, which is really insufficient to provide adequate cooling during heat waves. Just some other key findings are listed here in terms of their willingness to plant trees, their comfort level with opening doors and windows for natural ventilation. But one key point is that, as it's been pointed out in the past, the electricity bills and the utility bills in general are very high in Fresno because of the extreme temperatures. And this may increase with hotter summers. And I say may because if people use more air conditioning because it's hotter, it will definitely increase their bills. But if they can't afford to pay it, they may not take the step of increasing their air conditioning use, even though it's much hotter. All right, so we found that in terms of cooling centers, we found that most people prefer to stay at home during heat waves rather than going to another cooled environment, such as a community cooling center, for a variety of reasons. So findings from Susan and her team. So most residents prefer to balance mild discomfort from heat for the privacy and security of being at home. And several respondents voiced concerns about the demographic or the life cycle group that was in the center, such as seniors being annoyed at rambunctious, noisy kids, or house residents being concerned about homeless people there. And so there was no real, most common answer or silver bullet. Most respondents, for example, did not report going to any common locations, such as going to the mall or going to the movies, which also have a cost. All right, in terms of passive measures, or those measures that do not consume energy, we found that window films, roof and ceiling insulation, and cool walls are among the most effective passive measures overall. And again, that natural ventilation on the top floors in particular is very helpful. So this is just a plot of one of the aforementioned heat resilience metrics called SET, and a higher value here indicates more protection from extreme heat. And this is actually showing the distribution of responses across all the households in one neighborhood, the King neighborhood, which again is about 500 households, modeled for a worst case historical heat wave. But one thing to note again is that natural ventilation may have some concerns if there's poor air quality and there's chronically bad air quality in Fresno, and also some residents voiced security concerns. All right, so for active measures or those that consume energy, one important theme to emphasize is the benefits and values of having fans, and those could be portable fans or ceiling fans. They don't consume a lot of energy, and they can improve comfort and can also reduce electricity bills, as shown here. And secondly, we show that homes with swamp coolers only, if a home only has a swamp cooler, can greatly benefit from getting air conditioners. So in the top plot, this is the percentage savings in site level electricity use from the baseline. If you add a portable fan or a ceiling fan, you can see that there's a significant savings in electricity use, annual electricity use. And this is also an opportunity for more awareness and education, because when we shared this kind of finding with the community at our second community meeting at the end of the project, we found that there was a fair amount of confusion about the use of fans. Like people were thinking, oh, wouldn't it use more energy and wouldn't it cost more? And, it wasn't necessarily clear that people were, turning up their AC thermostat while using a fan, and that can save energy. So that's a potential opportunity. And then for homes with swamp coolers only, this again is the set metric where a higher value is more protection from extreme heat, basically showing that when you install air conditioning of any form, that you can just ignore this AC upgrade, but that you can get pretty much full recovery, or you can achieve a basically comfortable environment at all hours. All right, so we also developed a heat vulnerability index tool, which maps exposure, sensitivity, adaptation, those three factors into an overall heat vulnerability index by census block, which are the shapes here. And I won't read all the inputs, but they're shown here for exposure, sensitivity, and adaptation. But the bottom line is that we see the highest vulnerability in South and Central Fresno. And again, our study is based in Southwest Fresno. And you can see that there's a higher sensitivity in general and a lower adaptation capacity in general in those areas. I will just add that we do have a few journal and conference papers available at the calthrives.lbl.gov site, including a paper on passive cooling designs led by Caillou Sun, and the heat vulnerability index tool led by Yujia Xu. And then also there is a report or a presentation from Susan Mazer-Stoneman on outreach results in Fresno from a little bit earlier, from 2020. All right, I just want to mention the toolkit elements and what they included and the target audience. So our toolkit elements target various stakeholders from the local community to state level agencies, as shown in the table. The toolkit elements here on the left and the audiences here. Again, I won't go over all of this, but just mention that the toolkit includes a community cooling guide, summary tables of modeling results, 4 fact sheets on cooling measures, window films, cool walls, room air conditioners, and trees. Online tools, I've mentioned a couple of them already, CityBS and the heat vulnerability index tool. We also have a couple of 2 or 3 videos on that, describing those. And then finally, policy, program, and R&D recommendations. So I'll just give a glimpse of all of those. And Montron, maybe I'll just ask on the time. How am I doing on time? Just check. Okay, so I think I'm at time. So maybe I'll try to wrap up in 5 minutes or so. Okay, so just some toolkit examples. So this is an example of the community cooling guide, a 2-page guide, which is meant for members of the community. We also generated a version in Spanish with tips to stay cool at home, organized by themes, cool to the touch, air movement, and keeping heat out. These are 2 of the first pages. These are also 2 pages, and this air conditioning one is a little bit longer, about 5 pages. But examples of the fact sheets for cool walls and air conditioning systems. And these are meant for perhaps very motivated DIY do-it-yourselfers, or perhaps NGOs trying to provide tools or information, more technical information, but just providing description and some tips and some caveats and types of air conditioner and so forth. And then for the summary table of modeling outputs, this is just a summary table that we have for both single and multifamily, and at the level of a single building and also at the neighborhood level. So for example, with the grid on, this is a baseline metric for unmet degree hours, and all these numbers refer to the percentage reduction as a function of the cooling measure. So increasing the wall solar reflectance can reduce the unmet degree hours by about 24%, for example. So this is just for tabulation for reference purposes. We also have online tools and videos for the CityBS tool with the link shown here, and also for the HVI tool with the link shown there. And then we have, as the last element, policy and program recommendations, a few of which are shown here. I have more of them in backup, but just in interest of time, don't have time to go over all of them. But in terms of policy needs and gaps, the development of minimum cooling requirements by climate zone and building type are needed, and policies to increase the level of cool walls and cool roofs, or more reflective cool walls and cool roofs on replacement when you are replacing your roof or repainting your home. And then at the program level, testing, demonstration, and pilots, which can potentially be incorporated into existing programs of weatherization, but definitely I think more data collection is needed for that, and also finding out what works best for residents. And then similarly, I think there's more scope for data collection and baselining, for example, developing a heat resilience audit and assessment, similar to an energy efficiency assessment. Then for R&D, just mention a few items here, including non-energy metric development, and these can cover things like health, productivity, educational outcomes. And the quantification of these impacts are important to support code and standards development to include something like resilience to extreme heat. Monitoring of installed measures and their effectiveness is important as we try to deploy some of these promising measures. And also the development of more comprehensive climate assessments. So for example, we have a very well-developed checklist and audit procedure for energy efficiency, and it might be very valuable to try to consolidate that with an audit for heat resilience. And then there's definitely the need for more decision support tools to support larger scale deployment. So you can think of the home energy saver, if folks are familiar with that, for energy efficiency as an example, that maybe that could be extended to something for like extreme heat for more climate resilient buildings. And then finally, I think if there is an intensification of extreme heat, we should also think about the potential for more climate migration, which might be happening to a small extent today, to, in the worst case, more climate refugees within the state. So I'll just summarize very quickly. Methodology or methods have been developed and implemented to quantify the heat resilience benefits of cooling measures in a DAC, both the building level and the neighborhood scale. Several toolkit items have been developed to help residents in disadvantaged communities to better cope with extreme heat. And finally, we're actively disseminating the project results with policymakers and plan more outreach to other communities in the Central Valley beyond Fresno. I'd like to acknowledge, again, Liz Grassi and Leah Fisher in particular at the California Strategic Growth Council, and then all of my collaborators and partners at Lawrence Berkeley Lab, Indicia Consulting, West Fresno Family Resource Center, and University of Southern California, as well as the partnership and support of the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission and the City of Fresno. So with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Max. This was a great presentation. I will stop recording.